Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is Purchasing 101, how to make procurement suck just a little bit less. So if that's what you're interested in learning about the next hour, then you are in the right place. We are part of the Craft Beer Professional Group. Very excited to be here. Yes, if you can believe it, excited to talk about this topic. This is a passion of mine and something that I hope to share with you as well. And so we're going to dive right in here a little bit and learn together. We're going to jump between some of our content we've put together as well as some of the different examples too. So by way of introduction to start things off, just want to spell out a little bit about what we're going to do over the next hour. If you have questions, please put them in the comments section. I might put them till the end because there might be a slide that I have that addresses that, or it might be something I don't want to forget and make sure we answer it there. But we're going to start off by going through purchasing best practices. I find that's one of the best way to learn is what have others done? What are others in the craft and brewery community doing? And share some of those examples with you. Leading with that, moving into some processes that you can put in place. A lot of times working with breweries who are new, breweries in planning, or more established breweries about what are processes that they can do and how can they get started. I'm a big fan of starting simple. And then lastly, we end on some data sets to share. Again, going back to real world examples of what does some of the data show, where are some people being successful. So those are the topics we'll be covering here on Purchasing 101. And I do hope at the end you start to think about some things you can implement at your own brewery and put into practice, and that it does actually suck a little less. I am well aware that that is probably not top of mind for most brewers, is starting with purchasing as a fun topic, but it is important. So by way of introduction, my name is Dan Klasen, and I'm the founder of the Beer and Wine Federation. And not so that you're confused, as Andrew has teed us up here at the CBP, we are moving through this month a transition to the Beverage Federation. So I have some of our friends who are joining who are familiar with one, and as you're starting to hear more about our transition. One of the names for our reason for our name change is really we are starting to support more and more in the craft industry, so we wanted to broaden that name. Next, as we go, what is the Beverage Federation? And we are a group purchasing organization for the craft industry, and we'll touch on that slightly. And a little bit about me. As I mentioned, believe it or not, a passion about purchasing. When I talk to our brewery owners, our taproom managers, our people in the industry, I am typically the first to bring up what they're doing in the realm of purchasing and get excited about cost saving events. I also like to chat about barbecue. I will argue with you about N64 being one of the best things to play, and consuming craft products. I dabble a little bit in making beer, but what I really enjoy is consuming it, and I leave the expertise up to you all for making that great beverage. So with that, we'll dive right in here, and I provide a little bit of context. So, and it's important as we get into some of this to understand where our organizations come from, and it helps a lot of our brewers and a lot of the team members we're talking to when at least having an understanding of what the group purchasing organization is. And a GPO is a procurement tool at the end of the day. Similar to where an RFP or request for proposal or getting terms from a provider or a line of credit from your bank, these are all procurement tools that can help you accomplish your goals, specifically a GPO to purchasing. So what it does is you pool together a variety of different craft breweries and put them into a group and then go leverage with suppliers better contracts, better pricing, that idea of a volume purchasing. And then it allows those brewers, perhaps of a smaller size, to get more competitive pricing, services, or terms from those suppliers, and then they can still get the quantity they want. As an industry, GPOs and programs like GPOs and a lot of the procurement things that we're talking about aren't heavily utilized today. And there's an estimate that almost $165 million within the industry is left on the table, if you will, or unutilized, because a lot of the brewers and industry are not utilizing procurement tools, best practices, and negotiations. A lot of the things we're talking today, there's a real need for that. And so that's where we dive in. So the Beverage Federation, or Beer and Wine Federation, we exist in the middle. And why it was important to talk a little about all day long, we're talking to our brewery members, our brewery partners, or breweries in general, and then talking to suppliers. So our where we fit in the organization and the procurement structure is important to understand where we're coming from when we're talking about some of these topics. So the objectives, we really want to get back to providing real world examples for your organization, heavily focused on thinking of procurement as an important thing for your organization. It usually falls lower on the priority. You need something, you're out of something, you go buy it. Maybe you have to buy it quickly, and that leads to an issue of paying a premium and having your margins go the wrong way. So a focus on that, procurement, like you give time and attention to your accounting, legal services, and even sales. These are things that typically have higher priority, and get back to where you can prioritize purchasing and see some of that. And also a big fan of actionable data. So what can you do tomorrow with this information? We'll talk about that. And again, you'll hear me say a lot of times, start small and then go from there. I imagine many of you, if you are that owner and head beer maker, that your first batches don't always go according to plan, and that it takes refinement and improvement. Same for purchasing. It isn't the skill set that gets people as excited as myself, but it does take some practice, and it's okay to put something out there and say, well, we were able to save X% this time, and that's not a lot. But you can improve upon that and set a goal of saving Y% the next time. And that's where it's important. The questions I get about accelerating or putting purchasing higher is, okay, how do I do it? How do I save money? That's number one. And we talk a lot about that. How do I make sure that this doesn't impact operations or what I'm producing? I think that there is sometimes a perception that when we're talking about procurement and cost savings, that the idea is we're talking about get the cheapest stuff out there. And that's not it at all. The goal is to not sacrifice when you're talking about ingredients, when you're talking about things for your tap room, when you're talking about putting out, your image out into the industry. It's not about getting the, cheapest thing out there or some kind of shady product that might cost less. It really is looking at it from maintaining and improving what you're trying to create as from a taproom environment, from a production environment. And then, is it worth it? There's all these directions that a brewery owner has pulled, and they're saying that procurement typically doesn't make that top 5, top 10 thing. They're focused on sales, growth, production, and employees, and the list goes on and on of things that take up your time and energy. And we'll talk a little bit that it really needs to be on the radar. It won't make it to the top 1 and 2, but it should really be in your top 5 of things that we're looking at doing. So with that said, we're going to kind of break these out to the 3 buckets I talked about and start with best practices. And we're looking at best practices through 2 lenses. We're looking at it from the standpoint of what are others in the industry doing? What are others in the craft industry doing? What is something that the brewery down the street might be doing that I can really utilize? It's something that is proven. It's not new. It's something just not known. And the other lens that we're looking at it from is what do other organizations and other industries do that are of a similar size? So a majority of the breweries that we work with don't have dedicated procurement reps. They don't have someone that their sole responsibility is just purchasing. And you get into certain sizes of organizations where you do have those procurement teams and purchasing teams. So we're bringing some of that knowledge in, saying that you will, probably not have someone who just wears that hat, but you can still utilize some of the things that they do. So those two areas that we're bringing in that expertise from, where you have either a purchasing team or someone down the road is doing it, and now you want to leverage that and have that same thing. So we're going to mention a few of them, and then we're going to talk about the tools that you can use to start doing this. Some may be familiar to you, some you might be a little bit aware of, some might be new. And we'll kind of go through them and get into where you can get some of the resources for this. The first one is starting to request terms. So when I was running my first business years ago, I was so focused on sales. I didn't put a lot of energy learning about, profit margins, accounting, purchasing, back of the house things. I was focused almost entirely on sales and growth. And when I did have a question, I didn't always feel that I could ask, something I thought I should know as a business owner. So we do start talking about basics. And net 30 terms or net 45, net 60 terms is where your suppliers are saying, we are actually going to send you an invoice and you can have 30, 45, or 60 days to pay it. So a lot of early breweries start with that credit card, putting everything on credit card. And as hopefully you start to talk to your accounting resources, you realize that really your cash flow is king. It's your limiting factor. It allows you to do things that you want to do to growth. So starting to work with suppliers and say, and this is typically the role of a purchasing group within an organization, but it falls to the owner in so many organizations, is to communicate to suppliers, do you have terms? Is it available? Could we set up on terms? Could we get net 45 or net 60? And what your accounting resource should say to you is that helps with our cash flow. We now do not have to pay that cash to them for 60 days, and we can do other things with that. We can make more beer, we can pay employees, we can do other things with that cash flow. So that's one example of an easy procurement tool, not only just getting on terms, but stretching the terms, and then working with your suppliers as a way to improve your cash flow, kind of that procurement 101. Along the same vein of that is utilizing on some of your invoices you might start to receive, you might see the 1%/10 over net 30. And now this is the supplier, this is the communication back between your supplier and yourself, and they're saying we extended net 30 terms. And we're doing the capital and the cash outlay for that 30 days. But we will reward you if you pay within 10 days, under 10 days, and we'll take 1% off that invoice if you pay quickly. So this is just another approach and another tool to have at your disposal. Let's say that you work with your accountant to understand that we're not utilizing the cash flow and extending it doesn't benefit us right now. We actually have it cash on hand, and we can pay in 8 days and don't have to pay in 28 days. And by doing that, you're getting 1% off. So you can start to look at, the cost and the value of your cash and how to do that. Again, these are recommendations of purchasing to start to say is we might want to pay these vendors within 5 days and receive that 1%. And for others, we might want to pay them at the 44th day and hold on to that cash as much as possible. They don't have a reward system in place like this. Other documentation that is unique to purchasing, and sometimes I find that a lot of breweries I talk to think that this falls into accounting. They think that that's what my accountant does, or that's what they should be doing. And 9 times out of 10, that's not. The accounting role is primarily to be responsible for the bookkeeping. How is money moving in and out, and not always focused on how you understand your procurement and how to run more lean, or where there's efficiencies, or doing things like having a per unit tracking sheet. We're going to touch on some of these in the next slide on some examples, but these are tools that you can use, and we've got access on our site under resources, and I'm going to mention that a few times. You can watch the video back. I'm going to mention my email again at the end. It was on the front slide. You can email me and ask me, but I want to make sure you know where we have these templates available on our site to get you started. But a per unit tracking sheet is meant to, from a procurement standpoint, it's an area where you record where do we buy our shirts from, our apparel for our tap room, and where do we record the per unit cost. And it's a document designed to get at one very clear thing. I want to know my per shirt cost, my per can cost. That's usually an easier one. People can usually rattle that off. I want to know my per label cost, my per gallon of fruit puree, my per gallon of chemicals. Why that suddenly becomes very important from a procurement standpoint is now you have a number that you can start to talk to other supply individuals that might call on you and say, we can do better. And you can quickly compare a price comparison. You can start to look for benchmarks, and you can talk to, perhaps it's a brewery at an event or a buddy that's down the street and say, what are you getting per shirt? Do you like, and that starts that conversation. I know my per shirt, my per hoodie, my per beanie cost, as opposed to just shrugging the shoulders and saying they seem pretty comparable. They seem pretty price, competitive. That's too general. That's too subjective. You could be paying 15% over market, 20% over market, and you don't know. So you need to first have that information before you can start to do some research, which goes into the next bullet point here very nicely. I wish I had said I'd planned that, but it's the ability to then take steps with that information, like the per unit of doing competitive research and either staying with your current provider or switching. And we actually have some examples of those different processes. The most popular one is an RFP or RFQ, that request for proposal. That's one example of a very formalized process that we'll get into as an example. All of these bullet points as we go are going to have examples of things that you could do tomorrow at your organization, resources you can use to put these best practices in play. Evaluating the supply partner on more than just price. This is something typical of a procurement team. They evaluate the partner network on a regular basis. This is not something I see a lot from our brewery members and our brewery partners, and just there's just not enough time in the day. But what we start off as a template and a discussion of how could you do that and keep it simple. There seems to be anecdotal information. Everyone seems to know that we really like our tap handle guy, but we really don't like our CO2 provider. And there seems to be a shrug of the shoulders of, is it price? Is it service? Is it quality? Is it response time, et cetera? So evaluating supply partners and keeping that current, and then giving that to new employees, and doing something with the bad apples is really the goal. And again, that falls through the crack typically, but by getting that information and sharing it with your employees and understanding it is a great way to drive costs down. And because at the end of the day, your partners who are, I use the 4-star method, 1 to 4, who are 1 star and you know it, but just haven't done anything with it, are costing you money, are costing you time, are impacting your business. And so it is a realization that you've got to look for a different partner. We've quantified it. We know what we're looking for that in that other partnership, and doing that. So that's a big part of that. And it's something that's, I think, a growing trend, is that people are starting to evaluate those partners more and having more of a dialogue with the partners about what's working, what's not. And then this kind of, again, segues into a broader conversation of running lean. So with some of these discussions in your organization, as you bring on people, there is a growing trend in the industry. There's a couple of different trends we see from a procurement standpoint. One is that the adjustment to not running as a hobby and really running as a business. So starting to do things like Procurement 101. Another part of that is being aware of the expenses and working on eating that elephant of running leaner than you did last year, because there's so many things out of your control that you can't control: inflation, supply chain issues, et cetera, but you can impact how you run and to show your employees that it is important that we try not to order things last minute, that this is a business that high quality is important, and lowering costs where we can is also important, and we can do both. And that teaches those new employees that, the better we do, the more better the organization do. And we all know that the goal is to be in business 3 years from now. So if you're constantly saying, oh, we've got a new employee starting tomorrow, I forgot to get them boots, and we're going to order this all on Amazon, and we're going to overnight everything and last minute it, and that's the third time this week we've had to do that, it shows a culture that other employees pick up on, that we must be doing pretty well because we're playing premiums, we're spending money left and right, and that might not be the case at all. And even if it is the case, you still want to run lean to utilize that funds other places. Tools out there. So I mentioned that that there are tools, like we've talked a little bit about, RFPs, lines of credits. There's organizations like co-ops, Alliance, us as a federation, the CVP, mentorship programs. There's craft consultants. There are organizations and groups out there that have resources and tools that are there to help you run your business, that look at it. These examples are primarily through lens of partnership, networks, and the business aspect of it. So leveraging those is another best practice. So let's talk resources. And I'm going to bring up very briefly some examples here, and hopefully this doesn't go sideways as I bring up these Excel sheets in the presentation here. But I'm going to roll this out a little differently so that you see where I'm going. I mentioned the per unit purchasing template. I mentioned the partner evaluation template. I'm going to show you for a few seconds what those look like, just so you have it. Again, on our website, under resources, I'll show you at the end, you can download these templates. You can utilize them. You can start your own. I encourage you to make them your own. But the goal is to have something to just get started, right? That's really the goal. So the first one I'm just going to bring up here briefly, and it looks like it brought up. I'm not going to unpack this. It might be just an absolute eye chart here, but it's meant to say you're capturing that information here. I have an apparel sweater example. Who am I getting it from? And, how many do I get? Quantity 100. How much do I guess, cost per hoodie? $25, $31. Our last person we got them from was $29. Do they let us do terms? Of that? Do they have freight? How often do we buy? When do we buy? We buy a lot of our apparel in the spring or the fall, maybe twice a year. This is another thing to collect, is industry average. This is something we share with our members across our product line items, and happy to discuss that with you. So if you want to email me some of this, but industry benchmarks on what is the average hoodie. Right. And that helps you understand where you might right away have some low-hanging fruit. But that's also the conversational things. I hear it a lot about the big stuff. I hear everyone, cans, maybe it's point of sale platforms, maybe it's, might be malt, might be barrels, things like that, where people can sometimes rattle off their per unit cost. But when I say, what's your per unit cost on boots or floor mats for the tap room or toilet paper, things like that, that's where it gets, you want to have that written down and then understand industry benchmarks. The way we gather industry benchmarks is getting 3 quotes, 6 quotes from the industry through our RFP, RFQ process. So you can do that too. And then just document it. And it gives you that awareness of, this is, I sent this out to 6 people and we got this, and this was the average. So that's really a powerful line item there, as well as the understanding that then someone calls and says, I've got a great apparel t-shirt hoodie deal, and I'd like to talk to you about it. And I'm as low as $29 or $30 a shirt. Right away, you don't need to take that conversation further if you know your per unit cost is 25. So free templates out there. We're going to jump over to the other one here and switch gears to partner evaluation. And again, this is just a starting process. This is something I see a few brewers do. I hear a lot where someone will say, I can rattle off who's my good partners and who's my problem child. And that is okay. Year one, year two, you're building your partner network. This can help with a lot of things, both for you, for your employees, and then it helps identify really where you might need to make a change. So I have Tim's Kegs, and it's for kegs services. There is no Tim's Kegs. I'm not ranking on Tim's Keg here. This is an example for that. But when was the last time we updated this document date? But more importantly, I use a 1 to 4 stars, and it's easy to understand. You can use other things, but you're saying I'm going to be ranking some of our partners. Why this is also good is this moves past the discussion on price, where I hear price. It's an important data point. Don't get me wrong. Having good pricing is important. There are other factors of a good partner that will help your business or hurt your business. And that's important when you do have someone calling you and say, I'm 10 cents lower than your current provider. It's good to perhaps pause and say, how are they on the star ranking? Are they a 3 or 4? Or are they a 1 and 2? And so, for example, here we have response time, quality, made in the USA. Maybe that's important to you. Maybe local is important. Competitive price. Are they flexible? Do they work with you? Lead time. Are they good at it? Are they bad at it? Is it lower than the industry average? Maybe the notes is it just doesn't seem like they value our business. That's a feeling, and you don't have to justify it any further than that. It just doesn't seem like they value it, and maybe we have to go somewhere else. And then it is like a decision of, do we need to evaluate another partner? So that's the use of this document. Can be really helpful as you're going from maybe you're a 4 or 5 year established brewery and you're trying to put more processes in place, offload some of this. Maybe this is something that an apprentice brewer starts to take on as they're learning about the business, and they help manage some of that, and the production partners. Maybe a taproom manages the tab that has the taproom partners, but it could be a good thing to offset for established breweries that are looking to give some employees some different responsibility of managing those partner relationships. So again, the 2 documents here, I'll keep coming back to my information and where you can get those at the end here. Last 2 things I'll mention, if you really want to start to take this to the next level, there's a book on purchasing and supply management I have listed here. You can go to the library. Yes, the library, as you've not noticed, I'm big on saving money. So check it out, see if you like it. And this book is good for Procurement 101. It's 30,000 feet. And maybe out of that, you get a few things and processes that you could put into your brewery. It's not meant for someone who is a procurement professional. That's a much deeper level. This is high level. Try to get some things you could put in practice, put in place from that. The second one is Great Game of Business by Jack Stack. That's actually his name. And this book goes back to the idea of running lean. At the end of the day, it's being transparent with your employees, more so than I've ever familiar with. And it's a little interesting to read that it talks about being very open with your employees about margins and where we're at and what we need to do. And the feedback I've heard from other breweries who have implemented this is that it's very positive, because it gets everybody thinking, how can we put out a good product and be mindful of we want to stay in business. So it brings employees into the fold of that open book policy. So 2 things that might be of value. So we're going to jump into the simple process that I've been mentioning about putting in those processes, and going to probably start with what some people may or may not have at least some awareness of. Maybe you've done this in the past, but an RFP, or request for proposal, or a request for quote, is probably the most core purchasing processes that that not only can you start doing, but then can also have the biggest impact for your organization. You're going to hear this a lot from me. Keep it simple. If you're familiar with RFP, maybe there's a perception that they're huge 30-page documents and legalese and all of that. It doesn't need to be that. Without it, you don't have enough data to make a decision on what might be your larger or medium line items. And I do say medium size orders. I wouldn't start with cans and malt and hops. There's a complexity there. I would start with something more medium. Look at, for a line item that you're spending maybe 10% of your costs for production, or that is maybe over $5,000 for a purchase, or $10,000, to start to work on your RFP, get good at it, and then start to utilize it for larger line items. But with it, it's paramount for some of these. The data will make the decision making a lot easier. But as I mentioned, the challenge is people are saying, I don't know how to get started. I think they're overcomplicated, cold. I'd rather just call my guy and get my price, or maybe call two people and get my price and then write it down on a sheet of paper. It really can be beneficial. To the question I get, is it worth it? We did an RFP this summer as an example for a brewery, and uncovered an opportunity cost of $42,000 savings for that RFP, for that one line item of product. We helped them walk through it. We sent it out to 12 providers. If you're doing this can be the bare minimum that we recommend is 3. But the expectation is you could save $1,000, $10,000, $5,000. It will uncover savings or validate that you have a very competitive price. It's a great process, and we've given you some tools here to get started. I'm going to do the same, and again, as you see all over the map here, is the keep it simple approach. I do have my comments section open. If anyone has any questions, if I'm going too fast, or if I went over something you want me to clarify, let me know. Like I said, I can try to answer that as we go, or you can do that at the end. But template letter. So I'm going to roll both of these out. The template letter and template response document, which again, I'll just show you briefly. They are on our site. They are under the resource tab. They are meant to get you started. One is an email format. And what you're trying to do is communicate the same thing to either your partner, your current provider, and the industry, that this is what I'm looking for. And you want to be specific, and you want to be consistent. You want to say to, you don't want to say to someone is that we need 1 truckload, and then this person, I think it's about a half a truckload. You don't want to tell this person you're going to be buying in July and this person 2025. It's consistency, because consistency will allow you to compare apples to apples and see what do I need to do. And it'll also make it harder to miss something. A majority of the supply partners that I interact with are trying to win your business, and they're trying to be as transparent as possible. Sometimes things are admitted because you didn't ask for something, so they didn't put it on there. And then when you go to sign a deal, or after you found it, you found out that something might not be included. Is dunnage included? Is freight included? I thought you could do net 30 terms, and now there's a deposit or a pay in advance. It may feel at that point like hidden costs, and sometimes it could be. There are suppliers out there that operate that way too. I would say by and large, most don't. But the process is meant to make it easy for you to send out an email, the same email, to the 6 people who have been calling trying to win your label business, and say, okay, here's your shot. I'd like the following quote. And that letter communicates that. And it also gives a time frame. And when we see the letter, you'll see some of the things. If you download it, you'll see it. Because that's when the evaluation starts. From a standpoint, I'm going to roll out this last bullet point here because I'm kind of mentioning it. Track other areas in response. You could utilize the partnership tracking grid we did with the four stars as part of your RFP. That's something you record. And you could record the 6 partners that you sent that to, or potential partners, because what you're watching for, my recommendation, is response time is a great indicator, I feel, of a good partner. Someone wants your business. If they respond quickly, if they ask questions, they're engaged. When I get a spidey sense from a partner is when they don't respond. I'm chasing them and their responses are incomplete. They're putting off the signal that they don't really want it, or I'm a small fish. What it tells me is that I most likely will have problems with this partner 6 months from now. And then shame on me for not trusting that and quantifying that partnership relationship. So quick response time, being thorough, being professional, all of that, and showing you want the business, that gets a check. That gets 4 stars, right? So when you come to evaluating the 6 partners, obviously you're going to look at price, but you're going to look at things like response time and lead time, for example. And so maybe someone who's number 2 on the list goes to number 1 because their price was so close that there are things like response time and lead time put them in the number 1 spot. So that's really what I mean by this 3rd bullet point here. And then the hand in hand with the email is an actual template response. Same principle, same concept, is to have that data come back from the RFP and not put a lot of the work on you, right? You can get these off and let them work on it. And then when they come back, the goal is to make it easy to compare. I am relatively new over the last couple of years to the beverage industry. And so my experience has been with larger organizations, and there's some universal truths from procurement, project management, purchasing. It is not unique to the beverage industry and the craft industry to have it where supply partners send over quotes that don't always make it easy to compare. And you're having to ask these questions on, how many of your tops, get in your case. And it's like you need an absolute formula, which I enjoy building in Excel, if we're being honest, to get to a comparison. But it's frustrating because it doesn't make it easy to compare apples to apples. And so that's why if you send out a template and say, put it in this response, it's very easy then for you to look at the 6 and say, okay, I now can compare apples to apples. And I'll show you that template here just briefly as we bring this up. Capturing information, asking questions like, do you do payment terms? Please include freight. Please include if there's a print setup. This is a cans example. You're trying to give them as much opportunity to be as transparent with the RFP so that you don't have any hidden costs. And, in this pricing thing, it's asking for, what's your per unit cost? What are the lids and ends cost? How many come in a full truckload? Some of that you might assume, but it's good to have that in writing. Is there an artwork fee? What's your lead time? Right? These are just things. Is there deposit or dunnage or minimum order quantity? Now, if you've been in the business for a few years and obviously went through COVID and cans and all of that, I'm sure you have horror stories of the changes of minimum order quantity and all of that. If you're new, you want to make sure you have these included in the quote and in the request. But the other thing is it allows you to say, well, 2 years ago, you didn't have minimum orders. Now what's your current? So another great reason to have that included. So the real takeaway here is use our templates, don't use our template, but get started trying and practicing, like I said, on medium orders, to have that. There's your time has value as well. So the suggestion is not to go out and do what we do, which is reach out and get 16 quotes on koozies, something I've done, but it's to make sure that it's at least worth that value. But to learn a lot. You will learn a lot from that first couple of RFPs, RFQs, getting those together and sending them out. You'll learn things to include, questions that come up. You'll learn that as you're comparing, you have to go back and ask a clarification question. So you'll also talk about, and this is more of a Procurement 102 discussion, is strategy. You might just say, I send this out to 6, and then I invite 2 for a second discussion. And second discussion could be part of the negotiation. Now I have your numbers, but I want to know what else you could do. I want to know if you'll do terms. I want to know if you could, is there anything you could do with your dunnage? Is there anything you could do with your lead time? Co-branding opportunities. It's saying I'm going to have another conversation with a smaller group, and because I want to see we're close, but if there's anything else we could do besides price. So that also gets into procurement discussions. That's really starting to evolve of this. This is meant to how can you quickly communicate to your current and existing or new partners and start to drive down cost very quickly from that aspect. And then to round things out, this is changing directions a little bit, still in the vein of procurement and the discussion around purchasing and things you can do. A lot of my examples might have felt from back of the house, might be from production and all of those line items, tap rooms and things like that. We are very much impacted by procurement, but I haven't been talking a lot about those, or it might not be top of mind. This was an example of using procurement data to help the front of the house, the tap room environment, sales, and how you can partner together. So one of the discussions with this, and this is an example we did with a brewery, and I brought our interest and passion for cost savings and technology and data really to the discussion, and talked to them a little bit about how much can bulk food, snacks help, and accessibility help, and if purchasing could help things make more accessible and buy in bulk to drive down the margins, how could sales and the taproom team use that? And so one of the things we're talking with purchasing initiatives, I actually believe this for a lot of initiatives, is probably going to be surprised. Keep it simple, start small, pick 1 or 2 data points to data points. So we focused on ease of access and sales with this bulk order of snacks. What we did was we put up a few of these stands at a brewery event that was going on at this brewery. We put QR codes on them so people could actually scan and pay and walk back to their seat. And this is a trend that I'm sure you've been seeing, self-checkout. It could be a thing for your brewery, for apparel, for snacks. It's not there for most states, maybe all states, for law that you can self-checkout for alcohol. Who knows where that might be in a year or two, or if there's the ability to keep a credit card or an ID on file and lie for that. I don't know. That's really outside my swim lane. My focus on this was the idea of self-checkout and using purchasing techniques and tools to maximize the profit and the data. And our data got connected with point of sale data. So we focused on sales, ease of access. We didn't get complicated. Someone brought up the idea of, well, what if we could measure that, if they eat popcorn, they get thirstier and they stay longer. That's someone else can run with that data. I wanted to understand how you could make more money. And if you made it easier to buy and you bought more of something based off of what you bought in the past. And hopefully that makes sense, kind of where it was coming from, a purchasing mindset, and also helping to support the tap room. And so let me unpack these results real quick and give you that information and that impact and let you see what we found. So this event had 18% more people than last year. So there was an increase in number of people there. So you got to keep that in mind when we're talking units. But these little kiosks sold 89 units of snacks, and they weren't there last year. So the one thing that we saw that really jumps out is you sold almost 90 more units when you made things more accessible, and that purchasing ability for, in this case, consumers and customers to purchase more became easier. From a procurement standpoint, we priced them and worked with the tap room to price them very aggressively, $2 each a snack to do that. But what it allowed us on a purchasing end was to buy in bulk and drive down the margin. So if an average margin for your tap room snacks, let's say, is 37 to 47%, buying in bulk allowed this one to go over 50% for that. So sometimes the focus for procurement is more on the margin and then lets the tap room discuss on, okay, if we're making more money, how can we sell more of it, right? So that's kind of the handoff between purchasing and sales. And then of note is that last year, they also have snacks behind the bar. They've always had that. Similar things, popcorn, pretzels. Last year, they had 20. This year, they sold 19. So we'll kind of touch on what that means. But right away, not a big impact to their behind the bar snacks. Another variable that you want to help purchasing with is to make sure that they understand for their models all of the things that could impact their purchasing decisions. They had 3 food trucks last year and this year. So it wasn't like they were increasing food trucks and that would kind of throw things off, all things being equal. This was a unique one from a procurement model. We had not factored in loss or theft to kiosks that have a self-checkout. And at these kiosks, you saw 14% loss, theft, however you want to do that. I think the groupings that we were talking about afterwards, was it accidental or was it deliberate? And that's a discussion for another day. A lot of kids at this, did they see the stand and grab it and then just walk off, accidental? I'm not going to touch the third rail of brewery and talk about kids in a tap room. I'll let someone else do that. But the point is if you're talking about procurement and you're talking about introducing new ways of spending money within the organization, you want to have a model that addresses all the factors. So addressing loss, when you have kiosks, let's say they have apparel. Let's say someday they do have 6-packs near the door that you can self-checkout. Let's say they have snacks and food or whatever, self-checkout. Factoring in loss might be something you need to do. Your sales needs to do it. Your procurement team needs to do it because it'll impact your margins. And someone might walk around and say, this is great. We have 57% margin. And someone says, wait a second, what is that after loss? We don't have that loss with the product behind the bar. So again, kind of touched on these, but just to drive the point home, simple premise, keep it simple, keep it focused on procurement is our goal. You might bring people to the table. The taproom manager, the owner had some great thoughts about this kind of thing. So everyone kind of said, what would be the value? But we're all about the data. But this is something you can try in your own organization. A lot of POS platforms out of the box have the ability to do QR codes for that. But the higher bulk increased margins. So if you look at this, last year they sold 20 popcorns and pretzels behind the bar. They wouldn't have purchased a lot more than that in planning. But we hypothesized that they would sell almost 4 times that and 5 times that. And so it said, let's get more at bulk and increase those margins. So that's where the procurement kind of stepped in and helped drive bigger margins. And sure enough, 89 units were sold on top of the 19 traditional units. Ease of access, which is a purchasing mindset. Procurement is usually thought so much as how do I save money on costs, but the idea of making it easier to buy is kind of the DNA of purchasing. This just kind of extends that concept to the front of the house. And you can see that having these kiosks throughout and self-checkout helped increase sales from that standpoint. But one thing of note that I touch on with the loss and theft, but also it did slightly cut into the bar snacks that were behind. You would have expected with 18% more people to see that 20 move up to 22 or 23. You could make the assumption that a few people did not go behind the bar and get the snacks because it's self-checkout. So again, another thing, procurement in your models is saying, you know, am I bastardizing one side of my sales for something else? If that number had been like 3 instead of 19, that would have been a bigger issue, right? Where then you've just taken and you know the business away from the bar and moved it to the kiosk. So this actually was a lot of net new business that the exercise helped drive from that standpoint. So still in the vein of procurement, but also kind of how can you help? How can you help that head brewmaster make beer more efficiently? How can you help that taproom manager run the taproom? How can you talk about the build out or second location, which is starting brand new to use procurement to drive down our cost? If you have an expansion budget, how can you use procurement tools like we've talked about to drive it? How can you do partner relationship management with procurement tools like grading, like we've talked about, all around the idea of running leaner? And there isn't one magic bullet. It's more of a series of levers that you continue to pull. And I really encourage our breweries to see this and not try to eat the elephant in one bite. My recommendation is to pick something on a monthly or quarterly basis, perhaps assign it to someone who gravitates towards a little bit more of likes the numbers. They don't have to be a number geek, but maybe appreciate the value in taking something from X to Y. But is you can build up your success that way. And that's probably the note that I would end on. I think that being able to measure the success, especially early on, is critical to procurement development. And that 101, pick something, track it, put up a layup, an easy win, and then build off of that success. Then try something else. Maybe it's a second round of an RFP. Maybe it's starting to reach out to a few partners and evaluate if there's a new partner for next year. But track it where then you can say to yourself and your team is, we saved 10% from last year, all things being equal, doing these two things. That makes your organization more profitable. Any cost reduction you can do through procurement exercises directly goes to your top line profit. And that's why these practices are as important as legal and accounting and even sales, is how they can help you see diminishing margins with all the things we talked about that are outside of your control, and start to put in practices that puts you in control and tries to offset some of these things and continues to stay focused on being in business year 3, year 4, year 5, right? That is the goal for all the businesses that we talk to, is to do that. But I think you would get frustrated trying to stand up a procurement program next month and say, we're going to start doing these 6 things. That's where I see breweries. I talk to them and they say, well, we tried it and everyone got a little confused. Start small and go from there, build off of those wins. So I do have the time here for just a few minutes. If there's any questions, any comments, anything you want to put in the chat, what I want to call out as you're thinking about that, or may or may not put something in the chat, and that's okay. The great thing about what Andrew's team does is they put all of this content, this 100% free, great sponsors, who've been helping. And Andrew who really helps facilitate this. It helps us get our message out, and they don't cost you to help you guys run your businesses, which is really priceless. You can go back and watch this. You can share this with your team. But I do want to say you can email me and say, Dan, I need XYZ. I'm interested in some of that benchmark data. I had questions on that. You can go to our website, which for the next 60 days will be Beer Wine Federation, and then that will take you to Beverage Federation. But on there is a tab, a resource tab, and it's everything I've talked about for templates are on there, and that's really where you can get started. And I'm always here for a resource. If you can't tell, I really enjoy talking about this. I enjoy consuming the beverage that you guys make, and there's to talk a little procurement and to do it over a beer is you just described a good Friday. So if there aren't any questions, which is okay, we'll just end. I want to thank everyone for their time. And I do want to again thank Andrew and his team and his sponsors for putting this on. It really does help energize the industry. And as someone who is the last couple of years new, I can't state enough how invaluable some of these resources like this are to helping you guys do what you do. So thanks again.